Hey, Chris.
Hey, Greg, I'm just going to pull you on here now. There we go. And mute. We'll bring in everybody here so we can get started. And mute. That's to start video.
Hello.
Switches to gallery view.
Oh, hello, Julie. Hello, Philibert.
Hey, how are you?
Hello, everybody.
Oh, Philibert, we're going to ask to start your video here.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Wonderful.
Hey.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
This is
Good
perfect.
afternoon, evening.
Yes, thank you for joining us all the way overseas in Burgundy. So I guess we'll get started. Welcome everyone to Crew Classe Volume 8, run by Halpern, of course, here in Toronto, Ontario. We have been around since 1957. We're a third generation wine importer here. My name's Chris. I'm a sales agent, social media person, a bunch of everything here at Halpern. So I won't bore you with too much, but I hope you guys are all safe and sound at home. We wanted to do this video series just to obviously continue to educate the folks who are in wine, people who are interested about wine. Since we're all self-isolating and being safe at home, we thought this would be very important. And obviously we wanted to include some of our favorite producers, suppliers and things like that. So before we get started, this episode is with Greg Lambrecht, who is the inventor and founder of Coravin. And Greg, we'll get to you in a second. Julie Garton, who is the wine director at Four Seasons and here in Toronto, Café Balut, etc. And then we have Philibert de Vergil, who is the export director for Louis Jadot, joining us from your home in Burgundy, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Wonderful. So before we get started with you, Greg, I just want to, Julie, maybe you can expand a little bit on your role at the Four Seasons.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am the hotel wine director, but majority of my time is spent on the floor in Café Balut, which is our one of our outlets, which focuses a little bit more on casual fine dining. So I have a hand in the list there, consulting, helping out in our lobby bar, D bar by request. And then when we have banquet events, I'll sit in on consults for that as well. So kind of looking over the entire hotel where wine and the wine program is concerned.
Perfect. And Philibert, if you want to talk just a little bit about your role at Jadot, if you could.
Yes, please. So I'm an export manager for Jadot for now more than 7 years, principally on the European market at the beginning, and now I'm in charge of USA, Canada, so of course Ontario, for more than a year now.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Greg, I guess we'll start with you. Tell us your story. How does a medical device inventor get into wine and Coravin, and you know, maybe walk us through that?
It's a little bit out of order. I think I got into wine first. I was lucky enough to be in high school in Southern California, and I looked a lot older than I was. My parents are from Austria and Germany, but interesting, they didn't drink wine. So really didn't have any experience with it at home. My friends drove me up to Napa Valley thinking that I looked 21 and I would be the front man. And so they dropped me off at the outside of my first winery, which was Péju. And this was in the mid 80s. And I walked in and he served me my first glass of wine, Tony Péju, and I fell in love. And I probably spent the next 45 minutes talking to him about how did you make this? Let me taste everything else you have. So I had a passion for wine from the beginning. It expanded when I met my wife, and she drank exclusively European wines, and her family drinks a lot of European wines. So that like really broadened my spectrum of what I thought grapes could do. And I got into medicine after grad school. It was an early career in physics, and I started inventing new medical therapies, starting with Johnson & Johnson and then Pfizer, and then left to do it on my own. My wife and I would drink a bottle on a weekend or when friends came over, but there were all these times during the week when I wanted a glass of wine and maybe a different glass of wine from what my wife wanted. And we were always compromising. Somebody was choosing the wine and the other one was suffering with the decision. So yeah, there was that conflict. And then my wife became pregnant and she stopped drinking entirely. So I was like, what the heck am I going to do? And I realized I wanted to be able to drink a glass from any bottle that I own whenever I wanted to, without having to think about when I was going to drink from it again. And I luckily developed this chemotherapy delivery system while at Pfizer. that we would access over and over again through the skin. It was an implant underneath the skin. And so I'd gotten really good at making needles that could go through things without doing damage. I had one of these needles in my hand in a bottle going, there has just got to be a way I can get wine out of this with this. And that was 1999. That son is, I just saw him this morning. We stayed socially distant. He's 21 and 6'4", and pats me on the head when he can. So yeah, it took a lot of development and testing, but changed the way that I drink. In my cellar in Massachusetts, these are all the wines I used in the development of Coravin, testing over 5 years, the blind taste to see if it made a change. I've actually got a Jadot wine here, a Pouilly Marché that one of my investors gave me. I first invested back in 2013. I'm saving the last little bit for him. I don't know if you can see how little is left in there, but yeah, so this is it pushes a thin needle through the cork. It's actually the same needle from that chemotherapy system, the same guy who makes it. Tip it sideways, I press the trigger, gas goes in, I let go, and wine comes out.
There you go. Well, I've got some Jadot in the back. Julie, I think you have some Jadot as well.
I do.
Thank you.
I didn't want to be the first one.
Yeah, I hope you have some.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I have some, definitely.
So maybe
Awesome.
Philibert, maybe you could get into your usage of Jadot. Obviously, I was with you guys. I mean, you've been into our market many times now. I was with you guys in January, tasting through the domain. And one thing I noticed is that, instead of tasting through barrels, like a lot of smaller domains would, or any domains really for that matter, you guys actually pull wine into half bottles and then use Coravin. So maybe you can kind of explain when that transition happened. It's obviously a pretty big deal for an old school domain in Burgundy to be a little bit more forward thinking than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. On this topic, it's two different stories. The first one was about 5 years ago when we decided to use Coravin at Jadot for the visits, because we are welcoming so many people every year, private, but also professional. And at the beginning, we were opening bottles for each visit. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, no problem at all. We were opening samples. And we decided to, when Coravin appeared, we decided to move on and try to see how it will change the, I would say, number of bottles we are using year and year. So we decided to jump on that 5 years ago. And I will be honest, at the beginning, it was something extremely new for old-fashioned Burgundian style people. And I was not extremely fan of it, but now I'm working with Coravin every day when I'm at Jadot, definitely. When we have a group of 2 people, opening a bottle doesn't make sense. So we have a Eurocav where we stock all the wines we are using. We keep them maximum 2 to 3 weeks because our idea is not to keep wines for years in the Eurocav. We want to refresh the bottle. We have to respect as well our customers, but it's for us an extremely good exercise just to see the evolution of the wine into using the Coravin. Now, if we speak about the barrel testing, it's 2 different things. We decided to stop testing wines on barrel. As you know, we are extremely impacted by the weather, and the production in Burgundy is smaller and smaller year after year. So we wanted to respect and protect our production. And we welcome people every day. If we open barrels every day, that will impact the quality of our wines. And it's important, we took the decision, Frédéric Barnier, our winemaker, Pierre-Henri Gajan, his son Thibault, CEO and general director as well of Jadot, we decided to prepare some samples from barrels that we keep 1 week, 2 weeks, and we use jam cork. So we just use the Coravin as well for 1 week, 2 weeks, maximum for the barrel samples. So we respect and protect our product. And thanks to that, our customers, our friends, wine lovers, they can test wines from barrel, even if it's not with a pipette.
Very good idea.
Absolutely. And Julie, you've run wine programs across the city, from smaller restaurants to now Four Seasons, of course. How has the Coravin in particular run or affected your job, or by the glass programs or things like that?
Yeah, I think it's been obviously a great addition to what we're able to do in the industry. In terms of by the glass, I think that's where probably people have the most use for it. So especially at a place like the Four Seasons, we have a lot of people traveling, business travelers, and we get a lot of solo diners. And so we've got our standard by the glass list, but maybe you've got someone in for a meal and they want a glass of something that isn't being offered. This allows me to be able to serve really anything on the list. And I know it's going to be protected, and I've got, a couple of weeks then that I can go and move through that wine with it staying in good condition. So the main area where I've seen it in play and been able to use it has been on the floor to diversify my wine by the glass program, rather than sort of listing and printing a Coravin by the glass. I will every week just pick a couple of things that I want to put on and try. It's also great because you can do staff training with it. So whoever's on a floor one night, maybe we're going to launch a new wine by the glass. We can use a glass of it to give everyone a taste. Then they're getting their education. They can go out, they can sell. I'm in a unique situation as well where I'm working because we also have the residents attached. So we have a few people that use the dining room and the outlets frequently. So I've actually sold people magnums or bottles, and then we've kept it on Coravin, we've stored it for it. And then every time they come in, they actually have their own bottle aside marked for them. And then, so that's been really fun, features, opening magnums. I've done a few magnums with it for special events. So it really does diversify what you're able to do while reducing your spillage or any unnecessary cost to it.
Absolutely. Greg, did you have these kind of uses in mind when you created it, or was it mostly just a kind of an at-home thing that you did for yourself and then, spread the word about? How did that?
I made it for myself. I didn't know anybody else wanted to drink this way. I have 2-3 different wines in an evening at home, right? I do pairings at home, right? And friends saw it and said, "Hey, can I have one of those?" So I was making prototypes for them. I have a machine shop that's right over there, and I just machined them one over the course of a week. And they would give me bottles of wine in exchange, which is partly what's also behind me, which was great. I always take wine in payment. When I launched the company, I remember thinking, okay, well, I'm making so many for so many friends. Clearly, there's a desire at home. But I remember I was completely self-centered in the launch. I was thinking, I want to be able to go to a restaurant and drink whatever I want. So I thought about that from a restaurant standpoint. They have a better cellar than I do, and I wanted to explore what they had, or what the sommelier was excited about, or the rare wines you couldn't see. I did bring it to, so the first 2 places from a wine production standpoint I went were Napa and Burgundy. So Burgundy was really important to me. Their wines are unbelievable, and they don't make much because it's such a limited, tiny little growing area. And it's what I used Coravin for, was drinking Burgundy that I would never open like on a Tuesday, but I wanted a glass. So I thought about the winery, I thought about the restaurant, but the way that it's being used now, the creativity with which it's being used, like barrel samples or out of magnums or saving bottles for people, the wine industry, distributors, like I had no idea how wine was sold. I still work in medicine. I'm not a wine professional or in the wine industry. I just love this stuff. And it's, I got to tell you, as an inventor, the best thing is when people come up with new ways of using the system. And so we're going to keep innovating as we run into people like this, winemakers and wine retailers and restaurants that have new and better ideas. We'll keep working.
Absolutely. And even from an agency perspective, I do sales for both private clients and on-premise restaurants. And, talking about Burgundy, when we get a couple sample bottles of something from, say, Jadot, I've got a bottle of Monte de Tonnerre behind me from 2015. we don't get a lot of those bottles. So for us, a sales team at Helper, and what might be people, how do we distribute those properly? Sometimes people like Julie are very busy and you can't see them maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday. So if you're pulling corks on bottles, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity from a sales perspective, but also education perspective with SOMs as well. One of my favorite things to do is, maybe bring a whole whackload of Chardonnay to somebody. Some may have been Coravin 3 weeks prior. Some may have, haven't been Coravin or opened yet, and be able to even just educate the people that we're tasting with about different brands, things like that. So from our perspective, it's, changed the game really from a salesperson's role, which is something we really appreciate. Even one of our restaurants truthfully runs a by the glass program. And go ahead.
Yeah, that's funny, because when I was working on the European market, Luxembourg, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, etc., the priority was to explain what is Jadot from the bottom part of the pyramid with the regular wines, Bourgogne, etc. But when you want to test Premier Cru's or Grand Cru's, price is, of course, more expensive. And the idea was to explain them at the beginning, you should use Coravin. So when they were coming at Jadot and we were using them, the Coravin, people say, okay, that could be interesting. So now our partners are working with Coravin, and the sales team, exactly as you, Chris, they are showing iconic wines from Burgundy, villages, Premier Cru's and Grand Cru's, thanks to Coravin, and they can reuse the bottle for the next days, next week, for the customers. That's extremely good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I did not know that was happening, but I love the idea of fine wine being sold in simple restaurants, right? I mean, people should have, you don't need to buy many bottles, and, in Coravin, you can put on your list and see what happens. I am a wine guy before I'm a food guy. Like, I go to a restaurant because of the wine list. That's what I care about. And the food is sort of secondary. I always say, so what food would you pair with this wine I'm ordering? I'm not thinking the other way around. And to have that freedom in smaller restaurants is sort of my dream. Like, if we can make that happen, where every restaurant can have a wine by the glass program that has something cool and interesting, or a really nice white Burgundy. To start, I heard that Julie likes Austrian wine, so I literally have a table full of Austrian wine over here.
I'm coming over.
My family is Austrian. My mother's Austrian, my dad's German. So, yeah, and my grandmother, luckily, my parents don't drink wine. My grandmother does. She lives in Vienna, which is the only capital with a winery in it, I think. I can't remember. They have some claim to fame.
Well, even you mentioned, Julie's mentioned too, opening, special bottles for programs. We have a restaurant in Toronto who at one point had a customized Coravin menu with, DRC Latache, Ravenel Leclos, by the glass. When can who's offering DRC by the glass? You're not pulling a cork on a bottle of DRC and hoping you sell through a bottle in a night, that's for certain. But both Julie and Philibert touched on kind of, how long they would keep things Coravin for in the fridge. Greg, if you want to touch on that and kind of your experiments and your testing in terms of, from first Coravin a bottle to how long.
I've done 5-year blind tastings with winemakers. We held a big event in Burgundy, actually, 2 years, I think, at Le Cèdre with winemakers, and they were blind tasting their own wines and couldn't tell the difference 2 years after, and they'd accessed them and we left them at Le Cèdre. So wines can last for a very long time, but there's definitely technique that matters. And it especially if you're going to be accessing a bottle multiple times. We call it the 3 C's of Coravin: clean, clear, and cellar. So clean, wash it. Some people think of Coravin like a corkscrew, and they don't wash their corkscrew, but it touches wine. So there's wine that's inside the needle in the valve. So the end of service, the end of an evening, hot water through here cleans out the valve and the needle. If you've never done it, pour cheap vodka down here, because you can throw out Brett, Brettanomyces, Saccharomyces, Acetobacter, all sorts of nasty stuff. So make sure you wash it. Clearing is this. I'll grab my bottle of. So I just drank some Prager Gruner Achleiten, which is my favorite. I'm a Bauhaus fan, and now I'm moving to I'm moving to Brunelmeyer from the Kamtal. So I don't want to inject my Prager Gruner into my my Kamtal Riesling. So what you do is just before you go to the next bottle, quick press on the trigger, pushes all that wine out of the bottle or out of the needle in the valve, and it clears the needle and fills it with argon. So that you don't inject air or oxidized wine into the bottle. That's a really important step that very few people do, largely because our early instructions were terrible. Now we're better. So if you do those two things, clean and clear, the bottle will last, and then cellar is stored on its side. You got to keep the cork wet. I've done tests upright and horizontal. Upright's nowhere near as good. And if the bottle is mirroring empty, like my Pouligny Morachet, store them like that, like champagne. You store them upside down, keep the cork wet. Those three things, and temperature control.
That's very good to know.
Big difference. Clean, clear cellar. So I've got a bottle back here that's out 14 years. I've got a bottle here that's out 15 years. That Jadot is out 7 years. So yeah, I mean, it lasts a long time, but if you don't do those steps, you can kill a bottle in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And I know we've had a question about this too, in terms of cork types. Nowadays, there are so many different styles of cork, types of cork. Philibert mentioned he's using DM at Jadot, and I know they help create Grand Cru DM, if I'm not mistaken. Can you touch on different cork styles, what they work with, what they might have problems with, things like that?
We've done tests with all sorts of cork. We work with any kind of natural cork. DM is actually really good. So I'm a fan of DM corks. They're harder, so your needle won't last as long. It'll wear the Teflon off, like Northern Italian corks. The Piemontese use these rock hard corks compressed down to the tiny little neck. And it wears out your needle pretty quickly. But we work with any natural cork. DM actually did their own testing with cork. So they didn't listen to us. They did their own testing, and actually it gave me a science award that's hanging on the wall over there, which I was so proud of. So yeah, we work with DM with the capped composites. I just found a beautiful cork from somebody called BDB or something. I'd never seen it before, but it was a DM in the middle and two caps of natural cork on either side. That all worked great. Plastic corks we don't work with, and I hate plastic corks. There's enough plastic in the world. We don't need corks. But there's a new biopolymer cork that is like made from sugarcane, and unfortunately, it's not elastic either. So they look like corks. They almost brand them with a cork-like structure on the outside. But those, unfortunately, don't reseal. So if you're ever worried, just cut the foil and take a look, see what cork you have underneath. I see a lot of restaurants cut the foil just so that they can tell which bottles they've Coravin. That's probably not a bad idea. It also, the foil wears off the Teflon on the needle. So I'm lazy and I know a guy who makes needles. So
do you know why actually I have, one of the reasons why I have gotten into the habit of always cutting the foil as well is I think it does, I've had corks break, I think more from the foil, but also then you end up with wine getting just trapped underneath that. And then you can get also unwanted sort of bacterias. Yeah, so I always recommend sort of taking that off before you kind of start. And
I think it's a good idea. It's better for inventory, no question. And you can always dry it off. Some people, you'll see a drop of wine at the top of the cork, and that doesn't mean the cork is leaking. What's happening is when you pull the needle out, it drags a little wine into the hole, and the cork closes from the bottom up. So it squeezes the wine drop up, and then you'll see this little drop of wine at the top. Like I have some at the top of my Jadot bottle.
Yeah, there's always that little dab. Yeah. Good to know it's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, nothing to worry about.
And you guys do the screw cap adapters too, right? So obviously screw caps are big in places in Australia and things like that, but
Prager. So
and there you go.
Screw cap adapter. So you just crack the bottle and then place the screw cap on top. So Benjamin Leroux in Burgundy, using a bunch of screw cap. What you do is you just grab the bottle, crack it open, and then quickly place our cap on top. Our cap has that implant I was talking about under the skin. We use the same platinum cured implantable silicone rubber from the same manufacturer at the top. And this is reusable, so you can keep using it when you're done with the bottle. And actually, pretty much done with this one. I would normally open this up, drink the last glass, and then wash this. You put on the next bottle.
And do you find that the lifespan on cork and screw cap is different than it would be on a cork because of that membrane and because
we used to say 3 months. It would last 3 months. We changed from one silicone manufacturer to the one that made my medical implants, and now it's going out about a year. So we used to say you can use it 50 times, 50 strikes, and it would last 3 months. Now what I'm saying is it's 100 times and it lasts a year. So,
Wow.
But it's the same thing. You got to, even though it's screw cap, keep it outside.
Absolutely.
It works.
And Julie, have you had many feedback from guests? Do guests even realize things are really on Coravin, or is it?
If anything, it's more people that aren't familiar with it and are very curious about what I'm doing with their wine when they see it, like, and then they just want a little bit of an explanation. And I think it's become a brand, like it's become a brand name. Like I'll have people come in, and because we've had historically in the past printed Coravin lists, people will come in that have experienced, being able to order from that, and they'll ask. Like a lot of people that are familiar with it are like, do you have anything on Coravin? Regulars, they know about it. But I think there's still a lot of people that aren't aware the system exists. And so they're really like taken back and very impressed when you're sort of explaining to them tableside what you're doing and how it works.
I was about to ask, actually, is it something you would do tableside, or is it something you normally do behind the scenes?
Typically, because we do most of the wine service off of Girodon, near to the table. We'll see when all things are said and done. Now, I think a lot of things will change to wine service and restaurants for a little bit. But because of, there is a little bit of a delay to fill a 5-ounce glass, I would always give a taste to the guest of a wine for them, even out of Coravin, and make sure it's what they're looking for. But then I would kind of go to the closest Girodon and fill the glass from there, just so I'm not kind of leaning over the table and the guest too long, kind of that awkward moment, like
waiting for it to.
We're working on that.
You have to be patient.
We're working on it. I just used the Model 11 on my next wine, which is another Austrian. My family's from Steiermark, so this is a Sauvignon Blanc from Steiermark, from Neumeister, from 2015. So I was going to ask. I've got to imagine the tasting rooms are shut, Philibert. Are you guys mandatory closed down? And what's that like?
Yeah, actually, we are closed. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the production is working, but I'm working from home. All the sales team is working from home. So it's a very, very particular situation, but I mean, the same for the restaurant. Everything here is closed. So I don't know when we will be reopened. I mean, the office, not the warehouse, but the office. And more than that, when we will be able to welcome customers at Jadot. Honestly, I have no idea, because all the group are forbidden. I mean, all people who can meet, all meetings, etc., are forbidden. We will be able on May 11th to be at the office if it doesn't change another time. So it will be one person per desk, one person per room. So we are just working in a big frog. I don't know how it will be in the future. I don't know when I will get a chance to visit Alpern again.
It was supposed to be last month, I think.
It was scheduled last week, but of course cancelled. So I don't know.
Isn't it? It's one of the beautiful things about the wine industry is the travel, right? It's the people that you meet, it's the events that you go to. It's this helps a lot.
Honestly, actually, I can't travel just to Beaune, so it's a disaster. So I can't imagine to visit Toronto or to visit other markets. It's
crazy.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to start shipping barrel samples.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, you had me at hello. Just send the 375. I'll send cash.
That's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Greg, there's been numerous models of Coravin. Could you kind of explain? I know that you guys just released some. I'm using the Model 6, I believe, behind me. Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain maybe the differences between even the generations? I'm actually curious myself because I don't know. You went from Model 1 then Model 2. Now we have the Model 5, 6, and
You would
11. So
think,
if you want to,
you know, we at Coravin pride ourselves in being unable to count. So I went to MIT, which it's just so frustrating. But we started with Model 1000, which then became Model 8. I have no idea why. I'm not involved in other than Coravin, the name Coravin. But Model 8 was our original. You'll still see them around. I mean, they were a tank. You could drop them 6 feet onto concrete. These are all 6 feet onto concrete, which is a military thing. It was great, but using the hand clamp was like an exercise machine. And it weighed a ton, so you would put it on a bottle, and the bottle would just go, would tip over if you took your hand off of it. So we then made Model 1 and Model 2, which Model 1 was our entry-level model, and Model 2 was sort of our restaurant level. They all use the same needle and the same gas. Had a clamp that you would attach to the bottle. I don't have them anymore. Clamp you would attach to the bottle, and the needle would go through. But when I founded the company, I remember saying, Coravin should be faster, easier, and more fun than opening a bottle. It should be independent of closure, still or sparkling. That was the goal. We should be able to do sparkling wine, still wine. Doesn't matter what the closure is. Faster, easier, more fun. And so what we've done with our latest launch of Model 3, 3, 5, and 6, this is 3, which is our entry-level model, is we've gotten rid of interacting with the clamp. I'm going to pour myself a little bit more of this Neumeister because it is really good. And I've got to save the Jadot. I would drink the Jadot, but I wrote on the bottle, the guy signed it. We drink this when he makes his money on the stock in Coravin. I want to sell Coravin. I love my job. So anyway, the faster, easier, more fun. We took the clamp out. So I'm going to clear. So you just take it on top of the bottle, press the needle through, tip it, and pour. So press the trigger, gas goes in, let go, and that gas pushes the wine out of the bottle, not letting any air in. Tip up, and then you just pull it off. So I mean, it's pretty easy. It came from we can't count. It came from the Model 11, which is actually named after Spinal Tap. It goes to 11. If you've seen that movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. And the way that works is you can set a taste or a glass, and you can control the taste or glass on your phone. So I'll try to go to the app and show you. But while I do,
Julian technology.
It's very cool.
That's it.
And yeah, it's
Super evolution.
I'll show you this real quick. My Coravin systems. There we go. And we'll this is my Greg's Powerhouse. We have an app called Coravin Moments. So I'll go to Greg's Powerhouse, and it shows you how much gas you have left, how many times the needle has been used. But there's this little slider over there that I can slide up and down, and it'll increase or decrease the size and speed of pour. And our goal was to have a sommelier be able to pour a glass or a taste one-handed at a distance across the table without training. That was the plan. So, and you're going to see more and more of this coming in the future. So you just take it, press the needle through, turns green. I tip it, and it just starts pouring.
That's awesome.
And it'll stop pouring itself once it hits that.
It won't stop, but you stop it in the end. But if you count in your head, and if you set it appropriately, you can pour a 5-ounce pour, 4-ounce pour, 6-ounce pour. And then it's got this little handle here. And and you don't have to clear it anymore. That clean, clear, and cellar, it clears itself. You pick it up and it goes, a little gas comes out. So that you don't make
now
that.
Now that you mention, actually, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can I ask, like, with that system you're using right there, do you find it goes through the argon gas quicker, slower, the same? Is
control much slower, and it's because you can control it. So I'll show you how to maximize. I've got one last Austrian. Actually, I have two more Austrian. But
I love that. Really good.
Burgenland. So I try to drink from Steiermark, from two regions in the Cantal and the Wachau, and now we've got Lambrecht. So the technique to save your gas is multiple short presses on the trigger are much better than one long one.
Yeah.
That's a real key. So I'll show you the right way and then the wrong way, and you'll understand why. So the right way is press, press, press and let go. So you get the flow rate you like for the volume you're going to pour. If you want to pour more, just press it again. I'm just pouring myself a taste. And you tip up, you'll hear almost nothing. Right? There's a little bit of gas that comes out. If I were to press the trigger for a long time and let go, I'll pour faster. But if I stop, that's all wasted gas. And so if you pour with short presses, you'll get 20 glasses per capsule. If you press really for a long time, you'll get 10. So
okay, good to know, Philibert, for the seller.
Yeah, absolutely, good to know.
Yeah. Sorry about all the wasted gas. There are videos.
No, that's amazing. Actually.
And I know you guys do the numerous. You guys actually about to ask that question, but you guys obviously use the numerous needles as well, right? So you have what you consider vintage needle, and then fast pour needle, and the standard needle.
Yeah, we have 3. I see a lot of restaurants using fast pour because they just don't have the time. Fast pour pours about 30% faster. It's really easy to swap the needle out. You just unscrew like so, take it out like that. They wear out too, so the Teflon wears off just like with a frying pan, and so you have to change them every once in a while. It makes it so much easier to push through. The fast pour is faster. I wouldn't use it on anything that was more than 15 years old. The vintage needle, so Caroline Frey from Bordeaux. Yeah, so La Lagune. So she sent me a picture like 2014, just after we launched in Europe, of a bottle of like 1890 something wine with a Coravin through it. And she goes, "Oh, this is great." And I was like, "Wow, that's the oldest bottle we've ever seen it on." So tell me if the cork reseals. So we quickly made the vintage needle, which is thin. You can tell by the color of the hub; it's got a silver ring, and you can push it through a cork with one finger. So if you've got an old bottle of wine that you like, it pours much slower, but the wine took a long time to get to you. So still
yes, yeah. So basically, it's just the thickness of the needle that actually changes.
It's the thickness of the needle, the size of the hole. We did a bunch of fluid dynamic stuff to maximize the flow we could get with the minimum damage to the cork. So if you've got an old bottle and you're wondering whether it's Coravin in a bowl, put your hand around the neck and push on the top of the cork. If the cork slides, don't use Coravin. If the cork doesn't slide, it's going to be fine.
Amazing. And Philibert, do you use it for anything else other than the winery side? Do you guys use it outside of the winery at all, or is it mostly just for tastings?
For my part, it's only at the winery. I know that sometimes we test the wines in advance before to open the bottle to be sure that the wine is not corked or whatever. So it happens that we use it at Couvent des Jacobins, or we use it at the office or with customers when we are traveling. But for my part, it's only professional side. To be honest, when I open a bottle at home, usually at the end of the day, the bottle is empty. I'm sorry.
You use wine the way I use argon gas. I've got a lot of argon gas.
Do you now question, because I know that, for example, we did a big Grand Cru dinner a couple years ago. I believe Latour used theirs in their cellar to test wines before they sent them overseas to use for things like charity dinners. Do you guys do things like that as well, or is that?
I know that Frédéric, one of my colleagues asked Frédéric to do that, but when we offer wines, usually they are older vintages, and with shipment, we are not extremely fan of that, just to be sure that the level of the wine in the bottle is at the top. Yeah. So we prefer to ship 2 bottles to be sure that one is perfect if the second one has a problem. But we just do it in bone, before an event in bone, but not before to ship wines.
So
it should be clear too that
we do see a lot of that. Chateau Margaux tests all their wines before they send to make sure.
Interesting.
And
Jean Older vintages?
I don't know. They recork with Coravin, which was really interesting. I didn't. So I loved. Come on. It's going to come to me in a second. But what they would do is they used to recork by pulling corks and then finding the bottle that tasted the best, and finding the bottles that had oxidized and getting rid of them. And then they would top up the rest of the bottles with one of the best wines, and then recork them, and the bottles would be open for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And so now what they do is they Coravin across all the bottles, find the ones that is best, find the ones that are gone, get them out of the way, and then they just uncork, fill, cork, uncork, fill, cork, and move along, bottles open for seconds. So they were really very innovative in the way that they used it. Jean-Marc Rouleau, I had to make him a special Coravin because he was shipping 3 and 6 liter bottles, and he didn't want to ship 2 because if one was corked. And so I had to make a Coravin that could fit on 3 and 6 liter bottles. So there's 2 of them in Burgundy now, and a bunch in Bordeaux, and a couple in California for a large. I mean, we only fit up to Magnum down to 375. So I will make one if you guys need them. Just,
I wouldn't mind a 3 liter of Rouleau.
yeah, if you guys need, yeah, me too.
So that's actually a good question. So, if someone wanted to do something like a 3 liter, funny enough, one of the only bottles of Jadot I had at home was actually a 3 liter, and I kind of debated about bringing it on to Coravin, but I'm kind of glad I didn't now.
Yeah.
Will you make adapters, or there's a different piece, or are you guys looking into that and changing things up? Not too many people are going to Coravin 3 liters.
Yeah,
but
that's it. I mean, it's not a big market, so literally, I hand make them in my cellar still.
Oh, wow.
I mark them, I initial them in one way or another. So there aren't many people that need them, and if they wind up in the hands of winemakers and great wines that I really like, then it's really. Rosan Seba asked for one. I sent them one in Bordeaux. I mean, these are friends, right? People in the wine. That's the nicest thing for me about Coravin is to come at the industry so tangentially. I have no enemies. Right, and people that work in wine, people that make wine are wonderful. The places they make them are beautiful. The people that serve them are into hospitality and love the art that they're working with. I mean, it's fantastic. So it's my pleasure.
You mentioned earlier on in the conversation about your goal of creating a device that could work for still and sparkling. So I'm sure you get asked a lot, but is there something research in motion for the sparkling wines as well?
So I used to say the same thing. So my first career was physics and fusion power, which is the kind of nuclear power that doesn't work and never will, except on the sun. So when I went into college, they told me it's 20 years away. It's still 20 years away. Maybe it's 50 years away now. So I felt like with Coravin Sparkling, I was saying the same thing. I've been working on it really hard for 8 years. Because I want it to be the same. I want at least as good as Screw Cap. I want the last glass to be as good as the first. 3 months later, blind tasted against the bottle that was just freshly opened, and you can't tell the difference. The winemaker can't tell. That's my goal, which is really hard given the variety of different bottle geometries, neck geometries, the different perlage, the pressure levels. It's complicated, but we have a really incredible team at Coravin, and so the wineries are going to start seeing them soon. Some test restaurants around you guys will see one. Some test restaurants will start to see them as well. So we're going to leave them with the wineries for 3 months, make sure that they feel comfortable with them. We use our product on yours, so we want to make sure you're comfortable with it. And then restaurants to make sure that it doesn't break, because if anybody's going to break something, it's the restaurant. And then we take all that feedback, and we're hoping that we can launch to the broader trade and consumers next year.
Amazing.
I can't wait.
We look forward to it.
It's a lifelong goal. I've fallen in love with sparkling wine as a result of working on it. I didn't drink much sparkling wine before this project, and now I'm obsessed with it.
I would buy a lot
like
more
Burgundy
champagne.
With bubbles. I mean,
Yeah, me too.
I would buy a lot more champagne for myself if I could Coravin it, trust me.
Yeah.
the prototype bottles are there.
Compromises
I can't turn it. Was that?
I said it's the one wine that open seems to compromise the
You might have
fast.
lost your audio there, Julie.
Yeah. And imagine the reps carrying around a bottle of sparkling. You never want to be the last person they see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You guys can still hear me okay? My microphone changed for some reason.
Yeah, you're good.
I can hear you.
perfect.
Oh, you're good.
Maybe even better.
I know that you obviously run the floor and run the show, but do you find that it's pretty easy for
for anyone to adapt to use it, to teach the team how to use it? Is there any specific things that you tell people, if you're using it for the first time, what you should?
Sorry, I missed the beginning. Was that for me?
I think so.
Yeah. I have a lot of staff. I have a lot of skilled staff. I'm fortunate. I work with a lot of people that are very professional. They've been in the industry for a long time. So they're not really like captains, but there's people on the floor that are very comfortable. It's just me for a 120 seat restaurant. So there are times they'll take it. We'll have 2 on the go. And if someone wants a glass that I sold a first glass, they'll go with a second, and have had very little issues. Anyone that's new to the game and they haven't used it before, I will do training with them. Again, what we talked about, the best way to, preserve the argon and be the most efficient with the system. That does tend to be where we see a lot of the needles getting broken, but live and learn. But yeah, I find it's pretty easy. Most people, you give them a bit of a tutorial, they do a couple of practices and they're quite comfortable with it.
Yeah. No wiggling. I see people sometimes when they pull, they wiggle.
Don't
the
wiggle.
worst actually is there's 2 things that kill needles. One is people rotate it on the bottle to show somebody the label, and we strike the cork off center. So if you rotate it, you're going to snap the needle. And the other one is back with the clamp. People would forget, do I take the clamp off first or pull the needle out first? And they'll grab the clamp and the needle's still in the cork and they bend the needle, bend or break the needle. That's like the number 1. That's why we got rid of the clamp, because, way too confusing.
Well, there's a
The
little
only experience at Jadot with the needle was with a diam cork.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they are longer, like we use diam 10 or bigger for Grand Crus. So sometimes in the precipitation, and we just broke one.
Yeah, DM corks and Italian corks break needles. They're just harder, and it's the Piemontese and DM, and it's that's the Teflon wears off. So if you want to check, just take your needle off and look at the tip. If it's silver, it's run out of Teflon. It's much better to replace it because it will break after a while if it's going into a hard cork like that. I love those DM 10s. Those are great corks. I just pulled a cork on a bottle that had a DM 10, and I've been corking it over 5 years, and I didn't remove the foil. I didn't know what it was, and and there's a lot of pressure. We put in 1.5 bar in order to push the wine out. And sometimes you'll see some wine leaking up the side of the cork a little bit when you finally pull it. And with DM, there's nothing. Like the cork, it like wets the end of the cork and that's it. Like wine does not come up on the side. Those things are awesome, but they will break.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a new like level adjustment clamp I saw on here too, right? I left the sticker on because these are new.
That's so you can change the gas. So it won't move, like the clamp won't move. So you have to push up on this trigger, get it slide up so you can get your hand at the gas.
Very good to know.
I brought one final, well, I have 2 final ones, but one is Foxtrot, Okanagan Valley, Canadian.
Cool.
Ooh,
That's
Canadian
nice.
one.
To the bear, if you have not had it, global warming is being to Canada.
I already had some, but not this one.
Oh yeah, these guys are awesome. I'm a big fan of Foxtrot. It's good stuff. It's classic, like almost translucent, high altitude, cold climate kind of Pinot. A little bit smoky.
Well, Greg, one thing I want to touch on too, and Jules, you're welcome to show some input into this too, is that sometimes we'll talk with somms or restaurants, and they'll ask us when it was Coravin, because obviously people don't follow the steps that you mentioned. Some things can be off, but you guys do kind of a dare to compare tasting. We did one at Grand Cru this past year. I don't know if you want to dive into that a little bit and kind of putting somms palates to the test, I guess you can say.
I have to let Greg answer that because unfortunately I was walking around tasting
Yeah.
wine.
You didn't
Yes.
follow that time, so they don't
Very-
think, but-
So that was fantastic. We've done probably 1,300 people, all wine professionals, wine producers, mainly winemakers, Burgundy, Napa, Rioja, Ribera, Australia, all over Bordeaux. So we held these big events, and then sommelier in New York City, and in Paris, and in London, in Berlin, and Hamburg, in Madrid. So we did all these events. Actually, the Jadot is a bottle that I blind tasted with Bruce Sanderson of the Wine Spectator. What we do is we take a bottle that's been, we gather together and we Coravin half of the case, sign and date it, and then we come back 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years later, and we blind taste. And what we do now is we have a 4-glass test, and you don't know which glass or how many are from the bottle that was Coravin years ago, and which glasses are from a bottle from the same case we just pulled the cork in for. And so the longest one I've done is 5 years. The random chance in 4 glasses is, because it could be glass 1 and 3, it could be glass 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 4. There's 14 random possible choices. So it's 1 in 14 chance. And with both whites and reds, with wines back to 96, I think was our, no, 85 Chardonnay from Marc Perrin, Bocastel. So yeah, Hong Kong, that was a blind tasting in Hong Kong. We done one in Shanghai and Beijing as well. So our results are exactly equivalent to random, independent of vintage and white or red. So they're for the last 400 years, the only way that a bottle loses fill is the cork is bad or the storage is bad. Yeah. And so it's really hard, in particular for wine professionals, to think that wine hasn't changed. It's an enormous psychological hurdle. And so the more wine we find, the more wine knowledge somebody has, the more they think and are convinced it's changed. But it's exactly equivalent to random. My favorite blind tasting, if you can allow me to just go one story. Master of Wine, New York. We just launched. It's July of 2013, and she bought her own. I met her once, and she goes, "Greg, it works with reds, but it doesn't work with whites." I was like, "Oh, okay." But I tested like Austrian whites forever in white Burgundy. So, do you have the bottle it doesn't work with that you've Coravin? She goes, "Yes, I do." "Do you have another bottle of that same wine that's not Coravin?" "Yes, I do." "Okay, well, we'll meet at Chelsea Wine Vault in New York. They'll blind taste both of us on those bottles." She's like, "Great. Well, I've got 2 different whites that have changed completely. They've lost these are my favorite words, their vim, their verve, their zest, their energy, their electricity." I was like, none of those things are actually taste. So, but we brought them to poured, it was a 5-glass test back then, and she spent 30 minutes trying to find the glass or glasses that had changed. 30 minutes. Like, she could not tell. It was in her head, and then she guessed completely wrong, as did I. And they were poured by the store manager at Chelsea Wine Vault. That psychological piece is really hard to overcome. And so I don't think we'll ever stop doing blind tastings with people.
I think it's important, like you said, like, even from an agency perspective, it can sometimes be, like, oh, we've Coravin this maybe a month or 2 ago. Obviously we test everything. I personally test wines before I go to a tasting to make sure nothing's corked, because there's nothing worse than Coravining something for somebody at a tasting, I'm sure as Julie knows, and the wine's corked. That's always kind of embarrassing. But I had a bottle of Fulini Rosso that I think was 6 or 8 months Coravined, and if I wouldn't have looked at it, looking at it, I was a little bit skeptical, truth be told, but then pulled the cork on that wine and it was beautiful. It was perfect.
Yeah, I was lucky. I mean, we had Ceretto was our wine importer. He is our importer in Italy, and he's fantastic. And so he had some bottles that have been out years, because he started working with us in 2013. Yeah. And he just pulls a cork and starts serving it to me. And he's like, "Greg, what do you think?" I'm like, "Oh, it's great. Yeah, we Coravin this together back in 2014. I was like, this was literally before the COVID wall came down. I was in Piemonte with him, sleeping in his vineyard house. If you ever get a chance to go to the Ceretto vineyard house, his own home, it is unbelievable. Up on top of the hill, the Bricco Roque, it's gorgeous. You're sleeping next to the wine cellar, which letting the guy with a Coravin and a lot of argon gas sleep next to him where you store your bottles is a terrible idea.
I was with Philibert, but he never let me sleep in the cellar. So. Next time.
So Julie, you were saying that you are a fan of, or I heard you were a fan of Austrian wine. Do you have a particular favorite region or wine that you love?
A bit more of like an equal opportunity Austrian wine drinker, like Comtal, Wachau. I love the Gruners, like you get good value, they're nice, they're mineral, but something about Austrian Riesling, like it's dry, and I like that it's dry, but it still has such a great amount of fruit to it.
Yeah.
So I tend to sort of gravitate a little bit to Austria specifically for their Rieslings. It's just the style of Riesling I really enjoy. But like, there's so many great producers, like you named it, Gabelsberg, Leumer, Nigel.
Awesome.
Like, yeah, it's nice. But I mean, I'm a massive Burgundy lover, so it's like can't always afford to drink all the Burgundy all the time. So
that's the only problem with Burgundy. Is
yeah.
the cost. It's literally
That's
the
a
only
good problem.
It's a happy problem, yeah.
So, Philibert, when you are not drinking Burgundy, what do you drink? What's your?
I'll say just to you, not to the others. I'm drinking some Bordeaux. Definitely, I used to live in Bordeaux, but I like Oregon as well.
Oh yeah, man.
I love the climate, the area, the region is just fabulous. I used to be there a year ago, and it was absolutely lovely.
Does Jadot have any property in Oregon?
Yes, we have one. The name is Resonance.
Resonance.
It's a project we started in 2013, and we produce Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
It's one of our best regions, I would say, in the United States. Oregon is fantastic. Washington makes some pretty good Cab Syrah, but Oregon, and it's special. It's not like Burgundy. It's different.
No, of course it's different, but the touch is particular, I would say. The region is lovely. The climate, the atmosphere, the sea, the mountain, everything is just perfect area.
They're a lucky state.
Last July, and honestly, I hope I will be back there.
Yeah.
And you pulled Jacques Largy out of retirement to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a big deal. Absolutely.
Even if it's Guillaume now who is in charge of the domain.
I know Jacques still goes over there.
But I discovered some other areas from Oregon, domain like Lingua Franca, which is
Stone's.
Thomas is doing a great job there. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Makes epic wine. I'm obsessed with Eola Hills region of the Willamette Valley. I think there's Evening Land makes some beautiful wine there. There's a small company called Walter Scott that underprices their wine. I don't know why, and it's just so fantastic. Both their Pinot and their Chardonnay. I think they stopped making one of them. It's crazy because they were both so good. Oregon's fantastic. If I'm going to drink in Canada, Canadian wine, what should I be drinking?
Oh, it depends who you're at. We do Pinot Noir and Chardonnay quite well.
Yeah, Riesling as well.
Riesling,
Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling, Cab Franc, and I'm very excited with what Gamay is doing. Like we're getting a lot more plantings of Gamay, which is delicious. But
very cool. So is that Ontario, like just north of New York?
Yeah, I think it's a little different out in the Okanagan. It's a little bit warmer climate, so they can work with some different varietals with a bit more success. But specific to Ontario, I think if you're going to Prince Edward County, they're a little bit more focused. It is still a little bit cooler there. So really it's concentrated a lot to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, where you have I think a greater amount of microclimates, whether you're on the bench or you're Niagara on the lake. So we still see a lot, I think a pretty vast assortment of varietals being grown and experimented with. But I think those five really, to me, I think stand out as what would be our benchmark varietals for the region.
Who are some of your favorite producers?
I love Taz. They're one of the first people to kind of become certified organic and biodynamic. but consistency, and even their restaurant series, the wines they make, like the pricing, the value for money is really good. Up in there, I mean, and there's so many. So like, I hate answering the question because I feel like I will just leave people out that do a great job. Like Cave Springs does great Rieslings.
Big Head does really great reds.
Yeah, Big Head. Stainers, I think,
yeah, very good
producer up in the county that I think maybe flies under the radar, but I love Stanners, Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris up there.
I have a home up there in Prince Edward County. Actually, one reason why I'm actually in Toronto right now is because we have great wine but terrible internet in Prince Edward County. So I had to come into the city basically to do this webinar. But hopefully I can bring you, you Greg and you Philibert, and we can try and taste some wines from Ontario once you guys come back.
Oh my God.
With pleasure.
Yeah, with pleasure. Jesus, I mean, I fly 300 days a year. Used to. I used to be on the road 300 days a year, and my whole life is completely different. It's
wonderful. So I think we're hit about an hour. So I think unless anyone has anything to add, but I think we can probably wrap it up. Just so everyone knows, Halpern is the Eastern Canadian importer and distributor of Coravin. So we know a lot about it. Of course, thank you. So you can go to our website, halpernwine.com. You can find all the new models. We actually just received our first shipments of all the new 5, 6s, and 11s. We've had 11 for a bit, but new shipments of all just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. So we have everything in stock now, which is really wonderful. So feel free to ask us any questions or check it out. Obviously, support Julie and the restaurant scene. Are you guys doing takeout right now, Julie? Are you guys doing?
No, we are not. The hotel has fully closed. We are open for Mother's Day, so we're doing a little 3-course brunch pickup, and our fantastic pastry chef's going to be in there making cakes for Mom. So that is an opportunity there if anyone is looking for a Mother's Day brunch. But wheels are starting to turn, and I'm hoping sooner than later things will get somewhat back to normal.
Check out Julie, obviously.
Both Canada and France are handling COVID-19 better than we are.
Yes. And obviously, if people want to have great wines by the glass via Coravin, check out Cafe Beloud in Toronto. As well. And Philibert, thank you so much for joining us from Burgundy. I know it's late and you have children. So really
I have one, but no problem at all.
Well, thank you for your wine.
Having you, and obviously,
I hope he's not drinking my soda, actually.
If anyone wants to go to Burgundy, obviously let us know. We can hit you up with Jadot. We have plenty of other wines in the market as well. Just so everyone knows, next week, 1 p.m., same day, same time, we're welcoming Christiana Tiberio, who's one of our favorites. She's amazing. Please tune in to watch that, because she might jump into the vineyards and show you that cool pergola system that they use, and see her dog Kumari, I'm sure, on camera. Instagram famous. But thank you so much, guys, for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Stay safe.
Pleasure.
Anyone has
Thank
any
you
questions,
all.
please let us know. But
you're in Boston. Come to my house. You're in my cellar. Wine's on me.
I will be there.
Me too.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much again. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Be well.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.